Greetings and salutations. Great to be back in Amsterdam. I just arrived yesterday. Looking forward to seeing all of you and hearing about your projects. Let's start with my own. So I like I said, just arrived yesterday. I came from almost straight from the festival that I attended. So to introduce my project, I'm sure you don't all remember it. It was initially about studying the local global convergences in two different contact zones in Panama, specifically focusing on the relationship between different actors, perspectives of indigeneity, and how that is constructed in these interactions between the local and global actors. My first contact zone, the first phase and setting of my research was taken at La Soledad de Risco in North Panama, in the province Bocas del Toro. This is a province highly populated by the indigenous group, the Nobe. So the Nobe are the highest population of indigenous native people of Panama. I was living with Fernando and his family in La Soledad de Risco. My plan was to live there for approximately 2 months, the first phase of my research. I ended up staying 2 weeks, and I found a new setting, Isla Colón, which is the, so to speak, the heart of Bocas del Toro. This is where really contact zone is happening. This is where tourism is flourishing, in terms of ecotourism, but also for surfing, yeah, people come there to party and celebrate. There's a lot of rich cultural interactions happening there and a great diversity. However, I was still first at La Soledad de Risco. The greatest find here, relevance to my research, was the construction of a hydroelectric dam at their lake. This lake had been their main source of fish and also really the center of their communities. Their communities was before all in a couple of large communities centered around the lake. Now, when the hydroelectric dam was constructed, the people had to be moved, basically dispossessed from their land, paid to move away from their land. They were then spread out in different communities around the lake and otherwise elsewhere in Valle de Risco, this area. La Soledad de Risco was not directly touched by the moving. They were not forced to move from their land, but there was a lot of influences in how the infrastructure, so to speak, worked in this community, in this area after the construction. It made a lot of changes, influences, negative influences mostly for the locals. For example, in relation to having to assimilate more into capitalistic processes, where more people now are dependent on money and work, among many other findings. So after 2 weeks, I felt like I really had gotten a good insight into this and didn't see that there was so much else to study. Of course, I could continue and stay and get a deeper insight into the situation, but I discovered Isla Colón and the importance this had to the topic of my research, really the effects of the local and global interactions, and what that had to do with the influence on the life, the culture of the locals. When I say locals, I mean mainly the indigenous, the Nobe, because they are the main group of this area, indigenous group. So I found that my research was moving away from really perspectives of indigeneity. That was not really something that was easy to study or even important, but throughout studying these convergences of the local and global actors, you still get this really idea of what indigeneity means to people, and also how indigenous symbolism is used for different agendas. So really at this island, Isla Colón, also known as Bocas, the locals had really assimilated into this tourism lifestyle and really become dependent on monetary income, and used a lot of their own symbolism as nobe to gain to gain excuse me to gain customers. That's the word. Customers for their work. So there was, for example, a company called Nobe Tours that did tours around Bocas, and there was only Nobe people working there, and I had some interactions with them, which was very interesting. Otherwise, my main findings at Isla Colón was my most interesting finds was when I was finding different volunteers from different NGOs that were working with different indigenous communities in the area. So they had Floating Doctors, which is a healthcare medicinal aid NGO that works with indigenous communities. So I spoke with a couple of volunteers from them, and then I spoke with a couple of volunteers from Peace Corps, which is a developmental company, NGO from America. And they had a lot of insight into the life of the Nobe that they worked really closely with. So I got a lot of information that I could compare with my own findings. So there was really a lot about the culture market, indigenous symbolism, how that was being used, and how the interactions between the global NGOs and the global actors, NGOs and government initiatives like the construction on the lake influenced the locals. So, moving to my second phase, tribal gathering. This is also where my applied anthropology work came in, because this is where I started working with the organization. I was working really closely with the tribes themselves. First to remind you what tribal gathering is about. Like the name suggests, it's a gathering of tribes. So they invite a lot of tribes together from different countries in the world, and this is supposed to be a hub where they can interact and create and also work on their issues. And the idea is that they should be able to work on the interest of the cultural preservation and revival of traditions that are threatened of the tribe's culture, the different tribes' culture, and the life back home. Second, there's this Western aspect of the festival, which is about really about psychedelic trance, electronic music, party, the regular drug and alcohol aspect, and dancing. So this is really where the two worlds converged or rather clash, which was my finding in this festival. Of course, there was a lot of beautiful interactions. The festival was absolutely amazing as a whole. My personal experience and the people I spoke to as well had a great experience, and it was really a lot of love and learning from each other, creation, which is a usual experience of a festival, as it has this aspect of liminality, which was very apparent at the festival, but not part of the focus of my research. My focus was really to understand what this meant for the tribes being there, and mainly it was not very good. It was very a lot of tensions arising in these interactions. The perspectives of the tribes were not respected. The respected expectations they had were not met. The tribes sometimes felt as if they were animals in a zoo, especially apparent, for example, in the introduction of the tribes when they were all called up on stage and introduced to all of the guests. Afterwards, there was a big photo shoot of all the tribes together. So it was like, here they are, and come see the tribes, and this is what we're here for. But are we really? So the tribes felt like they were much more there for the interest of the guests and for this vision, this counterculture vision, which I also predicted in my research proposal. So I'm surprised about how much of my predictions were really confirmed at this festival. There was really the use of indigenous symbolism for the agenda of the festival, and it set a lot of questions as to what the organizers really wanted. What is the true agenda? Is it for the interest of the tribes, or is it for something else? Is it for creating this festival? Is it for creating a global tribe? This was a word often used even by some tribal members that believed in the cause, that this was really about creating a movement, connecting people outside of the limitations of culture, but breaking through that and finding the real human beneath all of these differences to create a global tribe. So there was really this clash of interest in that vision and in the interest of certain tribes that had very other problems, so to speak, that they needed help with, which was the loss of their own culture. So they needed help with cultural preservation back home, and felt that their time here was being wasted on something they don't really feel a part of. So to summarize the main topics, findings here, really the culture market, indigenous symbolism used for various reasons, for the tribe's interest of gaining income so they can benefit themselves and their own communities, which they can bring back home, but also the organizers' use of indigenous symbolism for the benefit of the festival as a whole, which they advertise to be, in the end, for the interest of the tribes. Secondly, there's the culture market. Secondly, really the tensions arising in these interactions, the different interests and what it means for the tribes. Yeah, those are the main two things that I really have in mind here, that I also can connect between the two phases. But this is the challenge, really, to keep a very specific focus between the phase 1 at the Bocas del Toro and phase 2 at the festival. I can see a lot of connections I can make, but that will be my challenge, to keep that steady focus throughout. So I think that's a good introduction for now, and I'm really looking forward to discussing all our discoveries further. I'm looking forward to seeing you all in class and elsewhere. So yeah, thank you.